Welcome, folks. This is the special Tanner lecture on artificial intelligence and human values. And as you may have noticed, the lecture and the questions and so forth are being recorded, so be aware. I'm Ben Kuipers. I'm a professor of computer science and engineering and here at the University of Michigan. And I've been doing research and teaching in artificial intelligence for a very long time. Now, way back in the 1980s, I knew a smart and promising graduate student in the Stanford Computer Science Department. And he interrupted his PhD program in order to go to medical school and get his MD. So he was interested in AI, but he was also interested in medicine, and he was interested in people. And he wanted to get a deeper understanding of those topics and apply them in his career. You'll hear more about Eric Horvitz in a few minutes in the introductions to come, and especially you'll hear from him about what he's learned since then, since he has continued to study this and that. We have a really exciting program lined up for you today and tomorrow. So I want to make sure you're aware of that. We're all looking forward to today's lecture, which starts in just a few minutes. After the lecture, there will be a stretch break and then an opportunity for questions. Now, the topics we're discussing are so interesting and so important that we will undoubtedly run out of time. Fortunately, we've got tomorrow. So tomorrow at 10, there's going to be a panel discussion right here. And there will be a breakfast buffet before at 9 and a lunch buffet afterwards, open to the whole audience. At the panel, we're going to have 3 eminent scholars from the University of Michigan. They're sitting around here somewhere, but one in philosophy, one in cognitive science, and one in artificial intelligence. And they'll provide their comments, followed by a response and some discussion with Eric. Then there'll be more opportunity for questions, answers, discussions, comments from the entire audience. Now, introducing a speaker like Eric requires teamwork. So I'm going to welcome my friend and Dean of the College of Engineering, Alec Gallimore, and he's going to introduce our wonderful new president, university president, Santa Ono, and he is going to introduce Eric. Alec.
Thanks, Ben, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm honored to welcome you to the University of Michigan Obert C. Tanner Lecture on Artificial Intelligence and Human Values. The Tanner Lectures are distinguished multi-university scholarly lecture series on the subject of human values. This lecture is one of 7 special Obert C. Tanner Lectures on Artificial Intelligence and Human Values. The 6 other participating universities in this series are Cambridge University, Oxford University, Stanford University, the University of California at Berkeley, the University of Utah, and Yale University. Tanner Lectures are funded through the generosity of the late professor of philosophy, industrialist, and philanthropist Obert Clark Tanner and his wife, Grace Tanner. Professor Tanner wrote, quote, "I hope these lectures will contribute to the intellectual and moral life of mankind. I see them simply as a search for a better understanding of human behavior and human values. This understanding may be pursued for its own intrinsic worth, but it may also eventually have practical consequences for the quality of personal and social life," end of quote. Artificial intelligence is something that has helped us and will continue to help us expand our understanding of the world and enrich the quality of our lives. AI algorithms have been integrated into all aspects of our lives, from our transportation infrastructure and telecommunications networks, down to our social media feeds and search engines. As a matter of fact, including YouTube, where this lecture is being live streamed. In many ways, artificial intelligence is becoming the digital DNA of this moment of our human experience. And while I am optimistic about this future, it is also critical that we are thoughtful about how we apply technology like AI and other engineering solutions in a way that reflects the diversity of humanity. As the nation's top public research university, we have a lot to contribute to this conversation. Within Michigan Engineering, for example, we know that excellent engineering fundamentals are critical, but it's not enough on its own. We need a convergence of disciplines, modeled by the community in this room today and throughout the Tanner Lecture Series, where we can draw upon critical insights, expertise, and wisdom from across a wide range of perspectives. In addition, doing our own teaching and research with equity-centered values and a global worldview in mind helps ensure we are doing work that serves all people. With these three ingredients, which already exist here at Michigan, we're creating a people-first engineering framework that will help close critical gaps in our society and elevate all people. The best possible future cannot be built in a vacuum, but rather with a full ecosystem of disciplines, systems, individuals who are focused on serving human needs and improving the lives of all people. That's who we are. This is what we strive to achieve, and this is why I'm so happy to be here with all of you for this lecture today. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce our next speaker in the series and the team of people introducing today, Dr. Santa Ono, the 15th president of the University of Michigan. He joined the university in October after serving as president of the University of British Columbia for 6 years. Prior to that, he was the president of the University of Cincinnati. He spent his career at research universities, including Emory, Harvard, Johns Hopkins, University College London. President Ono is an experienced vision researcher whose work in experimental medicine focuses on the immune system and eye disease. He's also an accomplished cellist, or should I say, I'm told he plays a mean cello. He holds degrees from the University of Chicago and McGill University. Please join me in welcoming President Santa Ono.
Thanks, Alan. Well, I'm thrilled to be here in this temple of graduate education, the Rackham School. And it means a lot to me to be in this building because my mentor, who chose me to be his deputy provost at Emory University, Earl Lewis, was dean of this very Rackham School. So it's a thrill to be here, and I've actually walked around this beautiful building and gone downstairs to the auditorium. There's an auditorium as well as an amphitheater. It's absolutely marvelous. And thank you, Dean Gallimore, for that introduction. And thanks to all of you for joining us today, especially our students in attendance. That's what these lectures are about. It's my distinct pleasure to join Dean Gallimore and Professor Kuipers in welcoming you to the Tanner Lecture on Human Values and to hear from our distinguished guest and keynote speaker, Dr. Eric Horvitz. Dr. Horvitz is a renowned computer scientist and a leading researcher in artificial intelligence who serves as the Chief Scientific Officer for Microsoft. In his research, Dr. Horvitz has pursued principles and applications of artificial intelligence with contributions to machine learning, perception, natural language understanding, and decision-making. An overarching theme of his research centers on the challenges of using artificial intelligence amidst the complexities of the open world. His efforts have stretched across a wide variety of disciplines, from healthcare and transportation to e-commerce and aerospace. And you can see the implications of his work with the diversity of people who are here today. At Microsoft, Dr. Horvitz provides cross-company leadership and perspective on scientific matters and on issues and opportunities that rise from the interactions of technology, people, and society. Previously, he served as director of Microsoft Research. The recipient of numerous awards and honors, Dr. Horvitz serves on the President's Council of Advisors on science and technology, and is a member of the Computer Science and Telecommunications Board of the National Academies. He served as a commissioner on the National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence, where he led efforts on ethical and responsible artificial intelligence, and has been elected to numerous learned societies. Dr. Horvitz, who earned both his PhD and MD at Stanford University, once remarked, I'm told, that he and others are working towards a future of human-AI collaboration that will, quote, complement, assist, leverage, and extend human capabilities. An example, he says, would be to build systems that extend our ability to do two things at once and help balance multitasking. That sounds pretty good to me. In his lecture today, Dr. Horvitz will challenge us to consider how we can use AI to expand our knowledge and understanding of the world and ourselves, and how we can leverage it to enrich our lives. Thought-provoking questions like these are why I'm very excited to hear from our guest today. Please join me in welcoming the 2022 Tanner Lecturer on Human Values, Dr. Eric Horvitz.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you, President Dono, for the warm introduction. It's an honor to be here at the University of Michigan. I have so many close colleagues. It's been great. We had a whole set of meetings this morning. I'm hoarse from all the excitement in our conversations. It's also great to be here in person. I know Ben and I rescheduled this with the team twice over the pandemic. Just to be here in person, that was important. So it's fabulous to be here face to face. So this lecture has been an opportunity for me to step back and revisit my long-term interests in AI research and on the influences of AI on people and society. But I'd like to start by sharing some framing reflections on the origins and nature of human intelligence. And I'll start by sharing two journeys that I made over the past decade. And these were both done in search of insights about the origins of our intelligence. And these forays were into our paleoanthropological past, provided context for me in thinking through the future of AI, and hopefully it will for you as well. Also helped me raise questions about the value issues we face with the progression and advancement of AI. So let me begin our journey with a trip back I took to, in 2009, to the Olduvai Gorge. This is by the edge of an ancient lake, not far from the famous Ngorongoro crater in Tanzania. Now, while it might seem like much at first glance, the Olduvai Gorge is a treasure trove for paleoanthropologists, as it reveals much about the lives and the skills of what I thought to be the earliest members of our human branch, Homo habilis. I went to the gorge to learn more about the cognitive world of Homo habilis. And these ancestors lived by a large lake, now long dried up, at this site nearly 2 million years ago. And this is where the paleoanthropologists discovered some of the first signs of a leap in hominid intelligence, especially with evidence of making stone tools and gathering them, and of the traces of their world into central places, showing evidence of cooperative communal activity. Now, I walked with great curiosity around the site, and you can actually pick up and examine the Homo habilis tools of the day that had been excavated. The visit to Olduvai Gorge raised many questions about our species, Homo sapiens, with origins recently, much more recently, at around 300,000 years ago. Let's close in on that. So one thing I found amazing, and we all want to reflect about this, is the finding that the overall body plan and the shape and the skull of Homo sapiens have not changed from 300,000 years ago to today. These people, 300,000 years ago, essentially looked like us, but they were not like us. And that's the opening to a big mystery. There's general agreement that the cognition and culture of our ancestors changed rather abruptly about 45,000 years ago, quite recently, with an explosion of cognitive capabilities that made their intellect apparently just like ours. Now, that question about what changed for Homo sapiens 45,000 years ago was central on a second trip I took to explore our roots when I visited the archaeologic digs and caves of the Upper Paleolithic, the more recent times, in France and Spain. Now, we started at the digs at Atapuerca in Burgos, Spain, and then went on to other sites where I had the chance to learn from multiple paleoanthropologists, including Anna Pinto, Christine Eugen, and even ran into Don Johansen, the discoverer of Lucy. The biggest joy and learnings for me came with entering nondescript entries like this one. These were portals into worlds where time has stood still for 50,000 years. But inside tells a different story. Here's what it looks like in a cave at Cueva de la Pileta in Spain. Entering the cave, you're exposed right away to numerous art and symbols of our ancestors. Now, we've all heard about the beautiful renderings of the animals that our ancestors depended on for survival, and these are stunning to see, of course, but what I was most fascinated by were signs of playful imagination, rich symbology, some jumping off the walls, giving a hint of what the artists actually imagined when they glanced at a piece of stone. And many of these symbols are seen throughout the caves across Europe and Asia, almost immediately appearing at this time, yet experts know little about their meaning. I also found fascinating the common expression of the hands of adults and children, seeming to communicate across time a realization of self-identity, a stamp saying, I am here, this is me. And we explored numerous sites with evidence of the stunningly fast rise of the expression of rich cognitive abilities in that time, 45,000 years ago, with symbols of and various signs of sophistication, such as musical instruments, growing complexities of tool manufacturing, and behaviors like tribal funerals, demonstrated by this haunting reconstruction of a woman in headdress and necklace who was celebrated in death at a funeral site we visited. Now, in sum, it's widely accepted that 45,000 years ago, there was a relatively rapid transition and gain of sophistication in the thinking and activities of Homo sapiens, and that this came quite impressively on a body plan that had not changed for over 250,000 years. And this indication of some impressive jump in cognition and culture has been termed the symbolic explosion, and some others refer to it as the creative explosion. As paleoanthropologist Richard Klein at Stanford said, there was a kind of behavioral revolution 50,000 years ago. Nobody made art before 50,000 years. Everybody did afterwards. So the emergence of human abilities and culture in a remarkably short span is still a great mystery to this day. No one really knows what triggered the sudden abundance of artwork, rich symbolism, jewelry, and creativity with many inventions. Now, a number of theories have tried to explain the dramatic change in the cognition of Homo sapiens, but all overall agree on one thing: our language. A human-made tool for representation, reasoning, and communication co-evolved and shaped our brain and its capacities for communication, cognition, and culture. And there was likely some kind of threshold reached in our capabilities 45,000 years ago. So it's quite likely that our own tools of representation and communication made us who we are with our current abilities today. And it appears that this coevolution of our minds with our language and culture is the thing that sets us apart from other creatures on the planet. On our late-breaking jump in intellectual capabilities, some anthropologists and linguists ascribe this sudden jump as based in the rise of a combinatorial system of thinking and communication involving syntax, semantics, and phonology that enabled us to generate and consider infinite and novel meanings, and to represent abstract and hypothetical concepts, and that these capabilities had a significant impact on our cognitive functions. Now, there are differences of opinion on whether this was all based in the changes in the sophistication of our language, or there was some, on top of that, some specific mutations that may have co-evolved at some point with pressures to harness our more sophisticated languages. Now, some hypothesize that Homo sapiens shifted from limited reasoning to an ability to generate infinities of ideas, as I just mentioned, via the use of recursive grammars, which enable us to embed sentences and their concepts inside one another. For instance, starting with Michael likes grapes, we can construct Mary said that Michael likes grapes, and then add another layer and different meaning with the statement, Sally believed that Mary said that Michael likes grapes. The recursion of noun phrases, verb phrases, and sets of mergers of ideas has been suggested as a crucial element in boosting our thinking and communication skills. Some paleoanthropologists and linguists suggest that the power and pressures to become adept at using and thinking with such rich representations and their languages co-evolve with and influence the structure and function of aspects of the human brain, reaching a threshold at around 45,000 years ago that gave humans a leap in cognitive capabilities, igniting the symbolic revolution, leading to unprecedented powers of imagination, coordination, and reasoning. Now, since the symbolic explosion, we've been creating and leveraging our own inventions at speed and building upon generations of prior inventions, including the physical artifacts that we build, but more importantly, the innovative tools that augment our cognition, tools of reasoning and imagination. These include mathematical notation and reasoning methods, representations that enable musical composition and creativity, and other tools of reasoning. So I view humanity as following an arc of intelligence, building out from the symbolic explosion, as we've continued to create and use our own tools to boost our personal and collective intelligence. Our capacity to keep inventing and then exploiting and transmitting across generations with tools that extend our cognition, our intellect, is a distinctive and vital ability of Homo sapiens. Now, I believe that with AI, we're at the crossroads of a new kind of creative explosion. Now, we were bound to one day turn our attention, sooner or later, to the roots of what sets us apart as humans, our mental capacities, our skills in reasoning and imagining, and our creation and use of tools to augment our thinking. With the rise of the field of AI, we've been exploring the computational mechanisms underlying thought and intelligent behavior. AI promises us new understandings of the foundations of intelligence and the creation of new tools of reason and imagination that will come with these understandings. Now, I believe that these new understandings and inventions will contribute profoundly to our wondrous arc of intelligence moving forward. Now, the founders of the field of AI asserted that they aimed to discover how to make machines solve the kinds of problems now reserved for humans. And in a short proposal that many of us have read for a summer workshop at Dartmouth, where the phrase artificial intelligence was first used, ideas and questions are laid out about human-like intelligence. Now, it's interesting that although the proposal focuses on the pursuit of computational mechanisms, I find the document to be a laser-focused description of distinguishing features of human intellect. The founders asked a set of questions in the proposal document. How do we reason? How do we manipulate words according to rules of reasoning and rules of conjecture? How do we generalize from examples? How do we admit new words and concepts and generate meaning from their interrelationships? How do we form new abstractions? How do we learn? What is the foundation of creativity? Now, early work in AI is largely known for its tools of reason. The most well-known efforts include systems built in the late 1950s that could play games and solve problems in logical reasoning and theorem proving, for the focus of early founders of the field, like pictured here, Herb Simon and Alan Newell. The work includes efforts on the General Problem-Solving Program, the GPS of 1958. This is authored by Newell, Shaw, and Simon. Now, GPS demonstrated how general principles of planning and what they called means-ends analysis could be applied to solve logic and algebra problems. But there was also interest early on and efforts in what I would refer to as building AI tools of imagination via a human-machine collaboration. I first encountered the Iliac Suite, which is a pioneering project on computer-assisted musical composition, in a 1959 book on experimental music. Now, I'd stumbled upon this book while searching online for a rare robotics book, which led me to a used bookstore in Pittsburgh that had several books from Herb Simon's personal library, said the bookstore owner. Well, I ended up purchasing a whole bunch of those books that I now cherish in my home library, including this book on experimentation with computers and music. Now, as I flipped through the pages of this book, a note from Herb fell out, revealing his reflections on devices for generating behaviors and mentioning the Iliac suite. So I pursued this. What was the Iliac suite? I was curious to learn more about this 1957 collaboration between two composer engineers, LeJaron Hiller and Leonard Isaacson, and they wrote a program for the Iliac computer at the University of University of Illinois at Urbana. Apologies to Urbana friends. But they could generate musical structures based on rules and probabilities using Markov chains for our probabilists in the audience, tuned with likelihoods from Johannes Bach's compositions. Let's listen to what they did. So why am I taking you on this journey through 2 million years of human history, from the Olduvai Gorge to European caves, and then to the dawn of AI research? I believe that our inventions have and will continue to play a critical role in our destiny, and that AI tools of reason and imagination will have profound influences on humanity over hundreds of years to come. I'm excited particularly about making advances in human-AI interaction, collaboration, and synergy. These advances will be particularly crucial for unlocking new possibilities and horizons for people in society. And with great power comes great responsibility, so I believe that we must guide the use of AI tools with care. Now, in support of these points, I'll briefly touch on where we are today with recent advances in AI. Then I'll do a deep dive on human-AI interaction, collaboration, and synergy, and then explore considerations of values and futures around the technologies that we're creating. Turning to today, we've been seeing really impressive gains in AI capabilities over 5 to 7 years in particular, especially in areas of automated vision and language understanding. And the leaps are surprising even to seasoned researchers in the field. So there's much to learn. Human intellect still remains a deep mystery compared to what we can achieve with narrow AI systems. And the benchmarks we use to test these systems are also quite specific to particular tasks. But we're making progress with specific competencies, and we're starting to see glimmers of more general intelligence. The progress has been driven by innovations with deep neural models, particularly with the training of these models on larger data sets and with much more computing power. Now, some of these achievements rely on very large-scale language models that are trained in what's called a self-supervised way, using a straightforward, ingenious technique of masking and predicting masked distinctions and tokens. So these advancements here build on one another and translate to many real-world applications and breakthroughs. As an example, I've been deeply excited about the harnessing of large-scale neural language models to predict protein structure and function from information about the amino acid sequences that compose them. The advances are truly a sea change for biology, and I resonate deeply with my colleague David Baker at the University of Washington, who we've been collaborating with quite closely on a statement, all areas of computational and molecular biology will be transformed. And just to give you a sense of the excitement here, the DeepMind team in London computed thousands of predicted structures covering over 98% of the human proteome, when prior to that work, only 17% of proteins were confirmed to date by experimentally determined structure. On the left, I showed the structure of one of the proteins predicted by the London team, where the red circle highlights structural changes that provide insights about how mutation leads to a rare neurodegenerative disease. The right depicts work at the University of Washington that my team helped with on coming to understandings of the protein interactome for your eukaryotic cell, on identifying proteins that are likely to interact with one another. And for the highlight here, the effort found interactions that could be linked with known pathways as well as new mysterious interactions that we don't even understand yet, but that open the door onto the dark matter of biology. I could spend a great deal of time reflecting with you on all that's been going on with today's advances that we're seeing with core capabilities, but instead I think it's important to turn to methods and studies that I'll focus on today that aim to create close and synergistic relationships between people and AI. These methods include using AI to augment human intelligence and skills, to bring together the complementary strengths of AI and humans, to support interactive engagements with AI systems, and to provide people with new ways to express, imagine, and communicate. These collaborative and complementary approaches with AI, I believe, will be integral to unleashing new possibilities and horizons for people and society. Moreover, by connecting human cognition with AI capabilities, these methods can be designed to respect and support human agency, initiative, and guidance. So let's start with systems that are designed to bolster human abilities by coming to better understand the goals and needs of people. I'll share 3 examples today. First, about a little bit of background. In 1990, right after I finished my graduate work at Stanford, I sought to test ideas about methods on the predictive models that I was very excited about using what were called probabilistic graphical models of the day. I was excited about methods that could help people to make decisions in very time-pressured settings. This work included decision systems that could help people with trauma care. And the work brought me to an engagement with the NASA Mission Control Center in Houston, where I worked with passionate flight engineers there who monitored data pouring from many sensors on board the space shuttle during shuttle missions. Now, I was excited about diagnosis and predictive modeling, and so I initially focused on the shuttle's mechanical systems, developing predictive models that could infer probabilities about various failures, looking at the schematics and then building what's called a Bayesian network, thinking about an influence diagram. This captures the decision-making part of the problem, and focusing on various failures. But in sitting with the actual flight engineers, I realized we needed to sort of think deeply about the human being in the loop, the operator decision, what was being displayed to them, and their delay. And these people are working under quite high time pressure. Some would have to, during a space shuttle launch, decide within seconds to make a call to abort the space shuttle launch. And given every few extra seconds, there's a whole different program as to how to bring the shuttle back. This is actually somebody we worked with at the time. The perspective ended up shifting my attention from simply building diagnostic models to developing models of people and their thinking and how they would respond to the sensor data. The models could be used to simplify and highlight information in a very personalized manner, a manner adapted to the flight engineer. So I saw that AI methods that could reason about people and their understandings would be as critical as the AI systems that we were building to reason about the space shuttle itself. And one of our solutions was to highlight displays on a big sea of information with color. So we turned the focus of machine learning and reasoning onto the minds of people. To review, we constructed a system that works to understand what people are trying to do, let's say probabilities of different failures on the space shuttle, while also making inferences about the problem itself, the world itself, on the left here. We need to bring these 2 understandings together to provide ideal support to the human being. And that's how this model actually works. So we're doing 2 different models, one for the human being, one for the system we care about, bring them together to help with advice. We have applied this approach in several systems since then. It's almost like a template for us. And additional examples include a system we built for modeling traffic. Not just modeling traffic in a Seattle-wide system that soon became a worldwide predicted model for traffic in the future, for example, given what's currently being seen now from many streams of data. We also separately developed models for what people expected to see that were kind of well-honed Seattle drivers and commuters. And basically put these together to basically create a system that took the base level models of what the people expected, and could predict future human surprises about the traffic. So the idea is we're now building a system that understands when an expert would be surprised by a situation, saying things like, Buzz, you better look, you'll be surprised about your commute. Looks fine now, but in 20 minutes you'll be surprised. This particular technology was intriguing enough that it was considered as the top 10 technology breakthroughs a few years back, winning the TR10 Award for Modeling Human Surprise. Now, in another application, we consider biases and blind spots and gaps of human cognition more generally. Research on human limitations in cognitive psychology, as many of you know who are in that field, has explored for over 100 years the challenges that people have with attention, memory, judgment, and problem solving. So there's been a dream that several of us have had over the years of harnessing AI to explicitly complement human cognition along key dimensions of human cognitive limitation. One project in this realm focused on remembering and forgetting in daily life. So I have to say that I have mixed feelings about this particular headline. But it really did drive my making too many commitments to keep drove me to pull a team together to say, can we do this? Can we help people out with a system that would reason about what I might forget and that would remind me? So this is now a system we built to do automated detection and reminders about commitments that I make to other people or that people make to other people in email messages. The service is now used by many millions of people and employs neural models to recognize commitments that people make to one another and learns about which commitments are likely to need reminders based on large amounts of data collected via implicit and explicit feedback. So I found that these reminders are quite useful. I've come to rely on these AI neural models to complement my own neural weaknesses with remembering all that I agreed to do. Now, in a final example of this kind of architecture, we can use this approach to drive alerts and reminders in high-stakes healthcare situations. And in work led by my advisee, Dae Lee, then a doctoral student at the University of Washington, we just a life and death problem referred to in medicine with the tragic phrase, failure to rescue. Failure to rescue refers to missed opportunities to save patients who die after encountering a treatable complication. This can happen when the physiology of a hospitalized patient reaches a tipping point and the patient suffers a cascade of organ system failures at that the hospital team doesn't recognize. So we need AI systems that can function like the safety nets in this picture under the workers building the Golden Gate Bridge, pictured here, serving to catch a physician who happens to slip. So to err is human, but AI systems can learn to understand that and to step forward as critical safety nets. Now, Dae and team trained the system to recognize this distinction using a bunch of data about unfortunate deaths in the UW system of people who were not expected to die, tens of thousands of them, to predict when a life-saving maneuver would likely be needed within 4, 8, and 12 hours, putting physicians on the alert to the possibility that a patient would start to slide towards death on their watch. Now, another kind of human-AI collaboration are methods that weave together the complementary skills of people in AI systems. Such approaches to complementarity are promising given differences in understandings, abilities, and the breadth of people and AI solutions. We've done several interesting and promising projects on this opportunity, and I love the magic we find when we have each contributor to the problem solving do their best to contribute to mutual goals. So I've been especially interested in using AI itself here to do the weaving, and this is a great opportunity space. So this is what we actually did with a project that combines the expertise of human pathologists and machine vision systems. A few years back, there was a competition with the goal of stimulating work on AI systems in healthcare that can detect, in this case, breast cancer metastases in lymph node sections. This is a challenge faced by surgeons and oncologists, where news of the presence versus absence of metastases is critically important for guiding therapy. Now, in the competition, the best machine learning system, a deep neural network, maybe to the happiness and contentment of the human pathologists, did not do as well as human pathologists. The human experts had a 3.5% error rate, and this captures the distribution of positives, false positives, false negatives. Now, surprisingly, a relatively simple combination of the AI system output and the human output led to a dramatic decrease, 85%, in error. You can imagine how you can combine the false positives and false negatives that were complementary in both these systems. Now, with traditional machine learning, we train a model using these machine learning procedures that operate on a large set of labeled cases on the left. We built a model by working to minimize the errors in a held-out test set. Now, in our work on complementarity, we thought we have a big upside here. Let's think about how we can take knowledge about human performance, and the competition actually gave us access to human performance on the same data set. And we basically thought this through in this way. Here's the AI system in Solo. Well, how does the AI system do with human expertise available to it? Let's compare the two. And decision analysts might understand this idea of expected value of information, but we're now going to sort of ask the question, when is the human expertise interesting and available and valuable to the machine? Put the whole apparatus, including decision-making about when to ask a pathologist, inside the machine learning optimization, and did end-to-end joint training of both the model and the query policy. So the approach pushes the machine learning to perform well where humans fail, and to ask them questions that are easy for for humans to ask, but hard for the computer. Here's a little bit of the background to give you a sense of what's going on in this complementary computing approach. We found that most human errors were in a region of the problem-solving space containing just 10% of all the cases. This is where people were failing. Now, the traditional approach to machine learning, if you just run it on its own, would fail in that region 30% of the time as captured by this intersection. So it's, in this case, we're having both machine and human failing. Now, note that where the failures occur, the AI cannot ask people for help in any of the failure regions, so in the expert failure region. So with the new methods, here's what happens. The optimization pushes the AI to focus its attention on being really good where people are poor. And that pushes, kind of like a soft balloon, its errors elsewhere in the space, where it now basically it does better in these regions where humans are weak. And this leads to new errors, but humans are kind of very good in those cases. But what happens is the system knows when to ask people, and people can do a very good job because these cases are easy for humans. And that's how the complementarity works. Now, multiple real-world applications of AI are not one-shot scenarios like a single prediction or classification. In numerous scenarios on the horizon, people and AI systems collaborate over multiple steps of activity, and we need to manage the mix of initiatives. That is, to coordinate contributions and their timing into rich sequences of collaboration on tasks. Supporting rich, mixed initiative collaboration between humans and computers is a deeply promising area. We've had numerous projects in this space, including efforts where the AI system helps to join and coordinate a group of people, becoming a contributor on a team. Especially one example shows you the promise of developing robotic systems, in this case, doing a mix of initiatives to assist humans with surgery. There's been fabulous and promising work going on with mixed initiative collaboration among surgeons and AI-powered robotic systems. First, how might an AI system come to recognize state and intention of what a human surgeon is doing? Now, several years back, Carol Riley at Johns Hopkins and colleagues demonstrated the use of machine vision to recognize the language, the grammars of surgery, to know, for example, when a surgeon was tightening or loosening a suture or transferring a suture needle from left to right hand. Such rich tracking of a complex visual scene can provide an AI system with the hints, with the insights and the grounding about the problem solving of the human they're working with, and to understand how we want to make contributions in such a human-AI collaboration. So here's a demonstration a few years later in a collaborative effort by teams at Johns Hopkins and Children's Hospital in Washington, D.C., showing a human-robot collaboration on a challenging repair known in surgery, and I used to avoid these in medical school because they were very challenging, anastomosis repairs. Kind of the kind of repair we do that when a surgeon needs to attach two pieces of intestine together. Now note the vision being used and the timing of both the robotic arm there with its help and the human contributions. So this gives you a sense for where things might be going in the future with interactive AI working directly with people, making well-timed and valuable contributions. So now I'd like to move into a different space, and I think you've probably all been feeling a little bit of this by just tracking what's going on, even in the in the lay press. This is on human AI co-creation. Over the last several months, we've seen the rise of deep interest in new AI tools of imagination based on advances in multimodal AI technologies. It's just been amazing, actually, to see the early days of community engagement and creation, and I think there'll be profound influences to come. Now, the explosion of generative AI technologies is based in part on advances with multimodal neural networks that bring together images, text, and other types of data. In the world, we all see and hear, generate and interpret natural language, and we fuse these things together to make decisions and to understand the world. Multimodal models are aimed at the same goals and can be used to transform, for example, text into related imagery and imagery into text. Now, when the system DALL-E 2 from OpenAI became available, some of the first queries I explored to just test the system out for a test drive was about visualizing and reflecting on a home project. I wanted to combine solar panels that the city told me I needed to put in with these large solar water heaters for pools. And I said, well, why can't they be in the same surface area? So I said, solar cells affixed to solar heat collectors for heating a pool. When I entered the prompt, I was really shocked at the detailed images that surfaced, showing rich compositionality of ideas for running water and heating through a solar cell array. Really mind-expanding in certain ways. Even showed these to an architect and to the power person. He gave me ideas on how to approach my home project. I was also interested in seeing what would happen with small edits to the prompt to change style of what the system was generating. So I said, draw it in the form of a sketch line drawing. Boom. Wow. In the form of a pattern line drawing. Wow. Ideas for even where to place the system and how to make a shade and so on. Now, there's so much opportunity in this space, and we've seen people doing all sorts of artistic things, not geeky engineering things with DALL-E. Let me show you something on the geeky side that's very impressive. This is a work by Vivian Liu that's currently under review. And it was work done when she was an intern with the HCI visualization team at Autodesk Research. So what they're doing is they're actually working in some of the most complex tooling spaces known to humankind. 3D modeling, in this case, a 3D CAD modeling tool called Fusion 360 that's produced by Autodesk. And they brought together and built a creativity pipeline, GPT-3, a generative language model, DALL-E, you just saw, the multimodal model for generating images from text, and CLIP that links text and imagery. And when they do is they injected this pipeline and watched how people worked. This is a very fast-paced video, sped up. But it's amazing, and I had access to videos of several different users with the actual sessions they had. It's remarkable to watch how people will generate prompts, see ideas coming from language going into visualizations with DALL-E, and then mapping directly from the DALL-E generated images into the 3D CAD space to build their models. This is humanity influencing and profoundly changing of how we work with tools in the future, this co-creation. In just a few months, it's been exciting to see communities of artists exploring the new generative AI tools. Recently, a community leader, John Stokes, wrote a how-to blog for artists about using generative AI in art. Now, part of his tutorial showed how artists can take a desired style, like in this astronaut's picture, and take their picture and map it over automatically as one's task. Interestingly, in one of John's blogs, he explains with clarity, I thought, how these models work. These words map into a latent space. Here's how you generate images. Here's how you do, inject, reuse seeds. Here's how you generate prompts. So there's a community growing of artistry where people are becoming kind of experts at the core principles of the AI as well as how to use the systems. For many of the new generative AI image generating systems, painting is done via exploration of natural language prompts. And here's a rendering and the language input to generate the imagery of this photo here, or this rendering. You can see how things are evolving and improving. So with this kind of work, you can expect contributions to continue across media types, including video. And I think we've all been seeing this explosion of videos and creativity on the web. Here's an example of a video created about a journey through a boy's life, created with a tool called Stable Diffusion. And again, the internet is exploding with wondrous imaginary videos created with these new tools. Now, AI tools are also being harnessed by scholars to understand us, how we work as people in society, using AI advances to develop new insights about our minds and our behaviors. As one example of this, we pursued a project that employs AI tools to help us understand patterns of discovery in biology, in particular, what scientists have looked at and have overlooked over decades with studies back to protein interactions. Now, here are snapshots of graphs representing known protein interactions in 1995 and in 2005. And here's a video showing the change in knowledge about protein-protein interactions with 2 points in a line between proteins that interact from the 1970s to today. Now, our AI tools revealed interesting blind spots coming via an interesting tendency for scientists to look for missing keys under the light. Thank you, Dolly, for this great picture. That is, to look for new proteins adjacent to interactions they had recently been discovered. And the analyses in this study showed how the AI system could do some causal reasoning to basically make decision recommendations to scientists on how to jump into the future more quickly, to look at the dark matter and the blind spots. Another work, and this work is being published this week in PNAS, we turned the lens of AI on human cognition, exploring the process by which people generate stories from their memories versus their imagination. So we employed large-scale neural models to learn from thousands of imagined and matched recalled stories from memory to identify differences in the sequencing and flow of concepts and events when someone imagines versus recalls events they've experienced. This is early work on a rich opportunity to employ AI advances to better understand our own cognition. I'd like to turn now to considerations of our values and futures around AI advances and how we might guide these influences to help people and society. We talked about new possibilities and powers of the constellation of technologies that we call AI. These powers will be influential and can be harnessed in numerous ways. And they'll shape our future in numerous ways. And like fire in this Paleolithic scene, fire can be wondrous or it can be harmful. So we have new powers, and some are coming pretty quickly, new uses and influences, and these will be shaping our future. Now, I'm an overall optimist when it comes to AI. I believe that AI advances will play an important role in our arc of intelligence with profound influences over centuries to come. In reflecting broadly about the potential benefits of AI to people in society, my sense first, before we get into detailed values discussions, is to really think through broadly, what do we seek as humans for our future? And one way I ask this question is, what does it mean to flourish? In an essay on human flourishing in PNAS, Tyler Vanderweel calls out key dimensions of flourishing as happiness and life satisfaction, health, mental and physical, meaning and purpose, character and virtue, and close social relationships. He goes on to talk about the need for more work on flourishing, and I completely agree. In looking for metrics, understandings, hopefulness, it seems that there's very little done relative to other more traditional measures, like quality of life index. Now, given the possibilities and the upside for humanity on many fronts, my assessment is we've done awfully little thinking about how well things can go. So when reviewing the literature on human flourishing and thinking about the short and longer term upside futures for AI and what AI can mean for human flourishing, I created 3 clusters of dimensions of human flourishing. The first is the pursuit of health, education, productivity, and creativity. And it's pretty clear to me that a core stream of current AI research can be harnessed to accelerate achievement of these aspirations with applying advances in diagnosis of disease, ideal decision-making, and co-creation. Now, we know less about how AI might enrich the softer side of human experience, subjective feelings of happiness and satisfaction with the pursuit of meaning. But interesting directions include AI systems that can help people to connect with one another, new forms of discovery, entertainment, and leisure, and tools that can help with reflection and self-understanding. On global challenges, I see strong opportunities for AI to help to address what I would call the seemingly insurmountable problems that we face by providing new solutions and new forms of resilience around such challenges as climate change, poverty, and inequality. Certainly, AI can help with insights and patterns in the physical and social sciences, and can facilitate synthesis in a cross-disciplinary way on these hard problems. I'm particularly excited these days about applications of AI in the sciences, including chemistry and physics, and what this can mean for opportunities ahead in areas like agriculture and sustainability. On the latter, we're seeing examples where neural models are being leveraged to provide multiple orders of speed up with molecular dynamics simulations. And we now have communities of researchers sharing results on both shared efforts and competitions on possibilities, including developing new catalysts that, for example, may make it easier to remove carbon from the atmosphere. On competitions, it's great seeing the annual Open Catalyst Challenge at NeurIPS and leaderboards with teams competing. This is from last year, but this is this year's announcement, competing to model and design catalysts. So I have every expectation that we'll be able to harness AI to support humans to achieve solutions to the challenging global problems we face and the ones we haven't seen yet, but we will face. What about the fire getting out of hand? Golly, help me here too. Well, yeah, several important and troubling challenges have come to the fore over the last several years with the rising uses of AI in our lives and in our futures. And these include the familiar concerns that we have a whole bunch of colleagues and companies and universities working on. Threats to human rights and civil liberties, exacerbating bias and discrimination, confounding fiction and reality, and garnering attention, manipulating, persuading, and polarizing, whether inadvertently or maliciously. For example, the new powers available via facial recognition can lead to new intrusions into people's privacy, and governments can harness these and other AI technologies for mass surveillance. And these can encroach on democratic freedoms and broader human rights. Challenges have been noted with the fairness of inferences and recommendations made by our AI algorithms as they amplify and extend societal biases drawn from the data that they're trained on. We can see these biases in numerous systems. Here are two queries to an early version of DALL-E revealing gender biases, no doubt reflections of the training data. A physician with a patient, notice the gender of the physician. A nurse with a patient. I ran these a while back and I'm stunned that these biases have really come right through the training into the inference of these systems. On confounding fiction and reality, the power of generative AI models are being used to generate deep fakes and generating them with ease, making it hard to distinguish real events from fabricated ones. Here's an example of how three systems can instantly take this prompt here to help bolster a decades-old conspiracy theory that the landing on the moon was staged. Now, I did the one on the left, but looks like we had some help on the Stable Diffusion and Midjourney. But the one in the middle is particularly persuasive. Well, we found this negative from 1968. What do you think? It's an example of how three systems can instantly take that prompt to bolster that decades-old theory, conspiracy theory. But then there are new rising concerns, and we see glimpses of these, but we expect these to become more salient over time. These include the potential for people to feel like their role in authorship and creativity is diminishing. Concerns that AI systems will displace human labor and skills, and that AI will reduce our human agency, autonomy, control, and responsibility as human beings. And with the rise of synthetic realities, including what I would call persuasive synthetic histories, there's a concern that generative AI tools will immerse us in what I've been referring to as a post-epistemic world, where our kids and grandkids will not be able to distinguish falsehoods for realities of the current events or histories. The concern with the diminishing role of humans in authorship and creativity came to light just a few weeks ago. You may have seen this in a prize received by an artist who used a generative AI tool called Midjourney to create his winning piece, Théâtre d'Opéra Spatial. Now, the win received a backlash from artists who accused him of cheating. Now, the artist defended his work, stating, he made it quite clear the art was created using AI. But my sense is that the artists were raising concerns that many share about where things are going with this technology. I meant to show that a little bit earlier, but boy, he stuck to his guns. And lastly, there are long-term rising concerns that could present significant challenges. On the longer-term front, we may be seeing the digital divide grow into the AI divide of the haves and have-nots with the best of AI reasoning and support. We may see major powers harnessing AI in geopolitical competitions, employing a variety of AI capabilities. Then there are long-term concerns with the powers of AI growing to exceed human oversight and governance. And there have been several voices in the AI community focused on this possibility. And there's the problem, and I put it right at the end there, the broader problem of these numerous challenges from AI to our core human identity, our dignity, our uniqueness, and our sense of purpose. So we need to weigh in. Unlike 45,000 years ago, we have better tools now. We can reason with experience and history, with sophistication, to guide our opportunities forward. Our focus now is to get ahead of these rising challenges and to guide AI towards human flourishment. We need to address AI innovations with care, and the way I tend to think about this is with considering, even in the short term, a cycle of responsible AI innovation. The way I think about this is we have an AI advance that might be a disruptive jump. We consider responsibilities in the context of a set of values defined by a set of stakeholders. Based on what we see and the implications and potential costly applications and downsides, we seek technical mitigations, and those lead to new responsibilities for the new artifact that we have and governance models under the guidance of stakeholders. Now, in the open world, as President Ono mentioned earlier, we have to monitor, because there's lots of complexity out there with red teaming and watching with log what's happening, because we have to modify what we do over time. I want to just briefly give a snippet of what happens at Microsoft these days. So 6 years ago, on the values front, Satya Nadella and a small group sat down and thought through the question, the answer to the question, what are our values about AI technologies? We came up with 6 values that have stood the test of time: accountability, transparency, fairness, safety and reliability, privacy and security, and inclusiveness. And teams of folks involved in this process, including teams in our legal division and a group called the Ether Committee that we set up, wrote about each of these values, what we meant, the semantics, in a volume available on the web called The Future Computed. Later, we wrote, as a company, the Microsoft Responsible AI Standard, which has requirements, practices, and tools, and guidelines all aligned by value. And these values and requirements guide our cycle of responsible innovation of the company. Here's a quick example, because this whole approach has led to multiple mitigations and even technologies being canceled. The synthetic voice capabilities that have come to the fore are an interesting, concerning direction for technology, back into falsehoods and fraud versus realities. So custom neural voice is a system that lets you basically, a user, utter a few sentences, and within a short period of time can call your significant other and have you write a check to an organization, for example. It's really powerful. So obviously this technology brings up many important issues based in both well-intentioned and malevolent uses. The general distribution of this technology was blocked by a process at Microsoft called our Sensitive Uses Program. And what we did was we thought through the details of the risks and opportunities, our principles, policies, and controls, and precedent, because other systems like this will come into the same consideration. And this led to a set of rules where the system would not be released generally. And when it was released through application, end users had to sign off on no use and deception. They had to limit to the use case they requested. They had to have voice talent permission. They had to inform the listener that this was synthetic and provide more details on how this all worked. Now, I jumped from a general reflection just now about responsible innovation to examples that I know quite well in industry that I'm most familiar with and I've been involved with. But guiding AI is going to require more than industry self-regulation and support. It requires participation from leaders across multiple sectors with important roles played by academia, government agencies, and coalitions. There's pending work in governments on metrics and laws and regulations. Many of these are pending right now, and probably people had a chance to read from Alondra Nelson's group at OSTP, the blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights. Quite well done as a framing for where things might go. But leaders in academia are bringing deep thinking and gaze on the frontiers, and they're playing a critically important role. I want to refer people to a recent, very interesting and thorough National Academies report by an academic and an industry team, as well as civil society, on fostering responsible computing research. There are other things we can do. So in 2013, my wife and I, as a family project, engaged with Stanford University, directly at the time with the then president, John Hennessy, on endowing a long-term study called the 100-Year Study on AI that would actually continue for as long as Stanford exists. It's an endowment every 5 years to get ahead of where AI is, to study it with a panel that stood up, and to provide advice across sectors to government agencies, industry, and other academics and civil society. So in the last, I guess, 8 years since we stood the program up formally, there have been 2 major reports, and excitingly, the 100-Year Study had a project called the Annual AI Index Report that now comes out every year. So it really was interesting to catalyze this effort about what I would call awareness and eyes on AI. And it's important to stay aware and to weigh in. So several years ago, a set of close academic colleagues, I'm sure all of you recognize Mike Wellman, we joined together to share concerns with President Obama about the applications of AI in military applications. The president responded and organized a meeting with our group and representatives of multiple Defense Department agencies. The only thing we couldn't say, we were told, was who was exactly at the table. But it was a very good discussion, valuable and engaging, and I thought it's really important just to basically, as an example, say we all can weigh in. We all have a voice. We're all here to guide. Finally, we need to be thinking broadly about stakeholders, from citizens of nations to the people using ad tech. We need multi-party stakeholder groups like the Partnership on AI, as well as smaller companies, civil society organizations, and academic groups. The Partnership on AI brings together a diverse mix of experts and leaders. This is from our board meeting. I served on the board just last week. It's fabulous to sit at the table and hear different perspectives and to engage on challenging issues on guiding AI in different realms. So if I shared a small glimpse into the efforts surrounding AI and its influences today, there's so much more to explore and to do. But I'm excited about the future of humanity as we build on what I see as our unique arc of intelligence. I'm optimistic we can make strong advances in human-AI interaction, collaboration, and synergy, and I believe these advances will be particularly crucial for unlocking new possibilities and horizons for people and society. And as I was just reviewing, it's absolutely essential we all weigh in to help guide AI wisely to promote human flourishing. So AI is truly, I believe this very deeply, the fire in our modern day caves. Our new understandings and inventions and our continuing creativity around harnessing these advances will really shape who we are and who we become. And our decisions will be viewed from far in the future as our own marks on our cave walls. It's up to us to leave our handprints, and it's an extremely exciting time in our history. I'm humbled that we're all along together for this journey. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take a short break, about 10 minutes, and then we can come back and have questions. So we'll have probably 35, 40 minutes for questions. Thank you. Work. So, we have heard a fantastic talk. It raises a few questions. And I'll bet you guys have those questions. So what we've done is we've got a couple of microphones here that you can come to. If it's difficult for you to come to one of those microphones, we also have a portable one right here, and we can come to you. And so let's have some questions. Okay, you're next. You're first, then you're next.
Hello, thank you for the presentation. Did the project on modeling human surprise rely on the free energy principle?
No.
Okay. Do you know much about the free energy principle?
Yes.
Okay.
You know, with human surprise, what we did was we actually built a model of by every segment of the road, probability distributions that were averages for for distinctions that human beings would recognize. Time of day, day of week, weekend versus weekday, weather conditions. Most people didn't know about, for example, Mariners games and you know, other sporting events that could create tie-ups, so that could be part of the surprise model. Then we basically predicted, we actually trained on expectation as well as on rare events at the tails of both way busy when it shouldn't be, typically, and way light, like really shockingly light. So in Seattle, when, for example, and you can actually, what was cool, we write about this in the paper, when we actually put case studies in the paper of like major surprises in the Seattle system, and there would be like 2 accidents that would tie up a bridge at rush hour, and all of a sudden 405 South was like wide open on, you know, because surprises can be good, you know, good and bad for traffic, right? It's like, whoa. I mean, I expected to go home on this other road, but there's like no cars on 405 because like 2 accidents occurred and it blocks a road, or you can see like, oh, rubbernecking is occurring here, which created this slowdown. So you can track the surprise, but the system had a huge model that was hard, mostly opaque, but we just tried to probe it to see what was the root of the surprises. But in general, we basically built a model of human expectation based on averages and tails, and it worked remarkably well. I mean, for me, it was amazing. I'd get buzzed, and my car would slow down. It's like, what's that about? So it really was tracking with real time. We didn't field that model beyond Seattle, but I think we need it most there. It's a pretty bad traffic system.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Radha.
Hey, Radha Mihalcha,
Again.
I'm professor of computer
I have
science.
to say
director
that
of the
Radha and her colleagues, Jenna and others, are the reason I'm hoarse today. This morning we had such great meetings.
I wanted to follow up. You only had it on one slide, the paper that apparently is coming out this week in PNAS.
Yes.
I didn't read this paper. I read an earlier version, and not with the intent of explaining your work, but I'll just say it for the audience. So the experiment that was done was having people imagine something, having people recall something they've done a while back, and having people talk about what they are doing now or very recently, and then seeing how AI aligns with each of these stages. And what was very surprising to me and interesting was that AI really was much closer to our imagined world.
Yes.
Next up was memory from a while back, and then the last one, the farthest away from what AI was doing, was the reality. And I really thought a lot about that, what that really means, that AI, something like GPT-3, for instance, is really closest to what we imagine and is farthest away from reality. So I would be curious to hear what you think about that.
Yeah, there are a number of interpretations, and we're still pondering this. But for me, the most salient result was when people imagine they're doing, my interpretation of the results are they're doing a sequential generation. They're actually literally saying, okay, and then this happened, and they're actually thinking about what they just said, and then they're doing their own kind of GPT-3 to generate based on the context. When you're remembering, especially when it's a fresh memory, before my colleagues think it's been consolidated, you're kind of going back to, and what psychologists would say is episodic memory, and grabbing at pieces of it, which might not be in the right order. You're just kind of, oh yeah, and then this happened based on salience and event structure. So it comes out less sequential, probabilistically. Interestingly, as you mentioned, if you ask them to retell their story several months later, it sequentializes more. It's more sequential in that you can use the sequential model to explain it with higher likelihood. There's a question about whether you can interpret this as being more like the GPT-3 model. And what's interesting is we tried different models, and it was insensitive to the model we chose in some ways. It was more the sequential nature, we thought. So we should talk more about this. But I just found had this crazy idea a few years ago. Spoke to Yejin Choi about it. We had Martin Sapp come in and work with us. Jamie Pennerbaker joined. So it's been a lot of fun, but the aspiration is, can these tools help us ask questions like this and then try to resolve them to get at the roots of what's going on? So maybe we should continue talking offline about this. But thanks for reading the paper. The new version, the final version, is a lot better than the archive version, I think.
So you are next, you're after that, then you, then you.
Awesome, great. Well, thank you so much for the fantastic talk, Eric. My question related to the loop that you had with responsibilities in AI. And I commend Microsoft for the work that it did with respect to the synthetic voice. That seemed incredibly labor intensive, and we're talking about an explosion of AI. So how do we scale that?
Well, certainly regulations will scale automatically. Right? So if there's a regulation, you can't do X with technology Y, that will just be the law or the regulation that's maintained. So that's one way to push for that, right? And then certainly we're seeing countries thinking about, and right now Canada and Europe and the US are mostly thinking about what they might do on the legal front and what's reasonable. I like the idea that NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technologies, has engaged in a very collaborative process with academics and industry on what they call the risk management framework, the NIST RMF for AI, where they try to come up with what are good metrics for even evaluating risks in different AI uses and AI technologies and applications, and starting with metrics first before we get start talking about what to do with them. But we have FDA weighing in, of course. We have HHS now saying things about these systems.
Is it moving fast enough?
I think it's moving too fast for some people, for what's coming, right? What may come, especially if it's inappropriate. And there are various comments about whether the European AI Act that's been proposed it really resonates with reality or not, or whether it locks Europeans out of a more reasonable marketplace with AI applications. So these are questions that just have been coming up. It's moving fast enough. So back to the scale issues. So it has been very intensive. Here's an interesting insight that I learned at Microsoft, being part of this process and helping with it, setting it up. I had hoped that when we had a sensitive use review, we'd be building precedent that would then help to speed up that loop. Oh yeah, that's like this. Like no more need to meet about it. But the surprising thing is how often it's been bespoke. Like, wait a minute, we need to think about the nuances and details of that case much more frequently than I had expected. So I had hoped, oh yeah, we'll just get some precedent. We'll have a library of like our point of view on case type X. But there's been an amazing number. I won't mention the numbers now, but it's in the hundreds of cases.
Enjoyed the talk very much. Thank you. You, I assume, quite intentionally, and I'd argue quite intelligently, decide not to talk about this current hot topic of are AI sentient. I'd like to ask sort of the meta. Not going to be silly enough to ask you that, but I'd like to ask you the meta question. Does that question even make sense to you? Do we have a common enough idea of what it even means to talk about are AI sentient, and to answer that question?
First of all, I think it's a very good question, not about today, whether today's AI systems are sentient. I think it's a great question to ask, what is it about our intelligence and our human mind that provides what we believe, what we label as sentience or conscious? And it's of course, a question that everybody that I know, and for many generations, and of course philosophers of mind, have been asking for a very long time, and neurobiologists and others. I think we have very poor understanding of what that would mean right now, what it means. So that's a good place to start in some ways. Like, you know, where are we with the literature and scientific foundations of what it means to have qualia, subjective states, to have a unified experience? Certainly that magic, knowing that it was coming from chattering neural assemblies, drove me into AI. First to neuroscience and neurobiology. You know, and it was sitting in the lab, as many of us have been in lab situations, but sitting in the lab for many hours, weeks, and months, and years, putting single electrodes as an undergraduate into neurons of the brains of rats and mice, and seeing in a darkened room the oscilloscope of single neurons firing, and just turning away from the lab bench and thinking, what the heck? How on earth can any kind of chatter like this among any kind of assembly generate the experience we all feel as humans? So I would start with that question, and that would be a first step in even trying to answer the question, is a specific model or system or set of constellation of systems, does it have that property? And I think that question would interest many people. So again, starting with the mysteries that we know as human sentience is a good place to start.
Thank you very much for a stimulating talk. I have a general question in the realm of synergies between humans and AI in the context of scientific discovery. Given that one of the growing values that we have about the scientific process itself is that we want to make it more robust and reproducible, in part in response to the replication crisis.
Yeah.
I wonder how you think about hooking up AI-driven science to the open science movement, or in other words, how we can use AI to make the way that we document, codify, and share the scientific process better.
What a great suggestion and framing for an effort. There are some efforts around that are trying to harness AI. For example, the meta-analysis done by Cochrane for medicine to bring together all, you know, try to automate and assist panels of clinicians and medical researchers to come up with documents that draw together as meta-analyses for particular healthcare and medical issues. And I don't know if people know Byron Wallace's work, for example, has been looking at how can we use machine learning to look at an article, a scientific article, look at how it describes the way the study was done, look at how the, whether it was double-blinded, for example, looks at the financial support for the study, looks at the results and the methods, and comes up with the ways to weight it for its veracity. These kinds of tools will become very important. The idea of more overarching systems that help us with the replication crisis, that can even go back in history and just crawl PubMed and all the index and say, okay, we have a weight on all these papers now, and it's trustable, is a very interesting concept. And going forward, I think we can do quite a bit there. It's a great suggestion. Jag and I had a great discussion today about that. He's very excited about what we might do with reproducibility, with coming up with the right kinds of principles. Do we really know yet, even statistically, what we do as humans? I mean, I think we have some challenges to work that out as well.
Thanks.
Hello. First of all, thank you for your lecture and your time. I hope that you're enjoying your stay in Michigan as a getaway from the Seattle rain. But as someone in the tech space, I'm particularly passionate about the effects of technology, particularly by Microsoft, since I will be joining next year, on our society and the people around us. And as machine learning founds upon human data that, as you've mentioned before, may perpetuate certain biases of racism, sexism, ignorance, and many more, what role do you think does Microsoft has of, as a business corporation that does not necessarily represent the affected marginalized communities, or and how are their voices being represented and included in the decision-making process? Thank you.
Thanks for your question, and I was overjoyed to hear your combination of, especially Microsoft, and I'm joining. So I like this. So when
I just want to make it clear that I'm not.
No, so first of all, we should talk in advance. We'll start now, but of you coming to Microsoft, because there's a lot of ways to join in. There's a significant passion at the company to getting it right, and to engaging various communities. So as an example, when we first started thinking about facial recognition, and you probably know that Microsoft came up with a whole set of principles and guidelines for how we handle facial recognition. And we actually took those principles and guidelines to Washington, D.C. and Washington State. And in Washington State, worked to engage on legislation with representatives in our state assembly. Because we didn't want to compete to the bottom with other companies. We wanted to bring up the level of what we thought was appropriate in terms of guidelines, guidance, and assuring civil liberties in different settings, public government as well as private. But when we did that work, the reason I'm saying this is we had this wonderful hearing where we invited in, I think it was 17 civil society groups to sit in a big room, and we just listened, went around and we explained the technology, and we listened to representatives. It was very interesting for us, and I thought it was also interesting for them because then we presented our perspective. We said, well, we're trying to do the right thing as a company. We have a general technology. It can be used in really good ways. Like, no one wants to wait on long lines at the airport coming back from an international trip. Oh my gosh, I can just put my head in and then keep on walking. Isn't that great? So should it be banned? And so even hearing from all the groups and then explaining and having this dialogue was really powerful. And we've done more of that over time. So maybe as you enter, we can think about, should this be more institutionalized? How do we hear these voices? And how do those voices not just stay in one of the conference rooms, but come up to our senior leadership team so our leaders can hear about the different perspectives? So I think that Microsoft in this day and age, is really open and interested in weighing in on the future of how these technologies will influence people. There's always discussions going around about the implications of technology. It's a top-level topic for the leadership, and that includes AI technologies.
Thank you.
And do reach out for engagement before you even start.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for the great talk. So one aspect of the talk has been like collaboration. So you mentioned like methods like Stable Diffusion, generating outputs, and the artist that won the competition, as well as the sort of pushback from artists about like, this is cheating, this is not real art. So looking back, like whether it's printing or photography, when those things were introduced, there was a lot of pushback. And there's a lot of discussion of things that were lost and things that were gained. So as we look forward towards like collaboration with like AIs in scientific discovery, what do you think there's there to be gained or lost? And do you think there's anything to be lost? And are there any lessons from photography, from printing, that we can look and towards sort of making this an easier transition?
We should have a panel discussion on this topic. These are great questions.
Speaking of which, we will have a panel discussion.
They're great questions. Yeah, so I have to just ask myself when I've seen AI systems do some things over the last few years, like, how do I feel about that? Because I thought, like, I was good at that. And, like, maybe because of my practice or my education or my study or my intensive efforts in a particular area, I want to be, like, stay good at that relative to other, like, intelligent agents in the world. Because I really believe in this and I want to be the best that I can. And maybe there's too much ego involved in that. So maybe there'll be a change or a shift in how we work with other systems and intelligences that are external to humanity's intelligence, and be more accepted to be working with these systems, and maybe we'll evolve to not being so egocentric, possibly. I don't know. Hard to know. There's a great issue, and I was going to actually share these perspectives in my talk, but we wanted to keep it within an hour. In the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists this month, there's a really beautiful piece that has 3 perspectives with quotations of very different viewpoints from the point of view of artists. about how they feel about what's going on. And I won't share them now, but I'll just say that they're all different. Some are very accepting and saying, rebelling against this is like rebelling against, Impressionism when it came out. People also said, like, what is this, Impressionism? Oh, can you believe this? And so, but it becomes part of what we believe is fabulous art now. So we'll see how it all goes. In science, boy, there's so much opportunity for these systems to assist us with discovery. I'm particularly excited about something that I'll just mention. We have expensive wet lab studies, even like say David Baker's lab, with validating proteins that are designed. And we have systems that can reason about, sort of in simulation. I want systems, I think it's a really great application to have systems do value of information computations as to when to do a wet lab study. Like, when do I need more information from the wet lab? Because that's messy and expensive. So if you figure out how to have systems help guide us as to where to put our attention when it comes to the hard experiments to do that are costly and time-consuming, that'd be a fabulous application in many areas.
Okay.
Hi, Eric. It's always really exciting to hear you talk. It always gives me more energy to go back and do a lot more exciting things. The question that I have for you, as you know, I am a computer scientist and I create some of these tools that you talked about. As a computer scientist, my training is in, as cliche as it sounds, ones and zeros, right? I sit there and give me an objective and I'll tell you something to optimize, and that's great. But as you point out, the things that we create have a lot of impact on things like human flourishing, like society. And it's hard for me to reason about this just because by training, I have not been trained to reason about the societal implications of the things that I build. So you talk about Tyler Vanderweel and his thoughts about human flourishing, forgiveness, happiness. All these things sound really great, really important. Would love to not contribute to lack of human flourishing. It feels like I do not have the tools to reason about that. So what do you see as our role as people who are trained to deal with things that are quantifiable, things that are optimizable? How do we reason about the implications of what we're building? And what is our role in that conversation?
Wow, what a great question, Maggie. My first reaction goes back to a discussion I was having earlier today with Richard Lewis about might we build systems where we computer science geeks put in the knobs and the sliders, let's say on values. How should my automated car deal with a deer at different speeds? Where you, before the autopilot comes on, what is usable, you have to watch some videos as a warm-blooded human that cares, and set your sliders, and then watch what it means, and then you can drive the car because it's your value function. So is it possible to start with that we could provide, as computer scientists, representations, for example, where the utility should go, and then we let human beings that study these kinds of things that are warm and fuzzy, or people and users do the kind of utility assessment. So we stay away from that. But you're asking a broader question, of course. And so the one issue that comes up is this. Academia and even industry, we reward people for being focused. Like, you're doing good technical work, you almost lose points by getting too broad and airy-fairy. So might we think deeply about making it more legitimate and supported to do work on societal impact as part of computer science research? Might we need new interdisciplinary programs where that's studied directly and head-on? So Maggie's interested in causality and ones and zeros. Someone else might be interested in exactly issues with value functions and human flourishing. There is a connection there because we need the ones and zeros. We need the smart technical people to solve the hard problems, even if it leads to a paperclip factory that someone else has to solve, right? That we hear about in these books on doomsday and AI race conditions. So it's a really good question. Don't have an answer besides saying that I know people who do both well. And I don't know where everyone finds the time for this kind of thing. But maybe when your hair gets gray, you find that you feel like you're more of a...
Getting gray, Eric. It's getting gray.
It can be time of life, right? But it's a good question. And I don't know about Michigan programs right now in like technology, people, and society, but those are interesting programs, and certain groups have funded those over the years, government agencies as well as private foundations.
Hi. I wanted to thank you again for the amazing talk. It was super engaging. I had a question about monitoring. So I know people are starting to monitor things like emergent capabilities and trying to generate explanations to monitor like the reasoning behind models. And I was kind of curious, at Microsoft, what are some of these metrics that you guys are trying to monitor, and what are some things that you wish you could monitor but isn't immediately achievable?
So this came up in early discussions today. One group that we have that I'm very excited about having at Microsoft is the AI Red Team. And it's a group of people that really look out and play the role of like trying to break things and trying to show problems with AI in the open world in ways that you might not do as a product person or even a researcher. And I won't talk publicly about all the things that they're trying to do and monitor for. But let me just say that we have to have people that are really smart doing that all the time and putting in place various kinds of checkpoints and monitors. Also, when it comes to new services that we put out on the, in the world, we want to get a sense for how they're being used, protecting privacy and so on, to make sure that there's not something that's observable that really is a surprise to an application that might do harm in ways we didn't foresee, let's say through our sensitive uses program. I'm going to stop there and not say more publicly right now.
Thank you.
You're next. Number 2, number 3, and then we're going to stop.
Hi, Dr. Horvitz. I actually had a similar question to the one about like voices of underrepresented communities. So maybe, and thank you for your thoughtful response to that. I guess similar to that, I think you mentioned like a synthetic voice at the stakeholder table. Do you see other opportunities for AI and like bridging the gap and like the biases that we may not understand we have like prior to deployment?
One thing that I think is very healthy and helpful is we've worked really hard internally and sharing externally open source, a tool set we call the Responsible AI Dashboard, which has error analysis, FairLearn, which is a fairness tool, Interpret ML, which is a system that lets you use a certain kind of machine learning to look at how, to give you insights about how models are working on workloads, a causal tool. So I think having great tool sets out is one way to help people with understanding biases in as well, not just tool sets, but also we've published our Responsible AI standard, which shows how we work in do we made it public. So in that tool set, I mean, in the Responsible AI standard, you can read for every value of the 6 values, what we require at Microsoft for the product people and product engineers to go through, including impact statements, use of those tools, and so on. So those tools and what we do, we put out on the web publicly as well. And so we're trying to not just make sure our systems are fair along multiple lines, and there's several different kinds of harms that can come from challenges with fairness and inclusion, but that we actually share the methods and ideas openly, and also get feedback and learn from them. I think we're also always interested in learning about how to do things better when it comes to these evolving and emerging technologies. So always open to feedback about our Ether program. Ether stands for AI Ethics and Effects in Engineering and Research. It's a committee and working groups involving people from Microsoft Research and other parts of the company, ethicists and so on. We have an Office of Responsible AI that's very engaging with the world, with government agencies and civil society groups. So there's a process of trying to learn. The big idea is staying ahead of the technology. Like, sort of being proactive and thinking, oh my gosh, could this technology be used to inject malware into, unknowingly and so on. So I think we're just trying our best. I mean, it's a company, but a company with, I think, a good heart.
Hi, Dr. Horvitz. My name is Shelby Pitts. I appreciate you talking about anthropology. I have a BS in anthropology from Michigan State, and I'm currently getting my master's in human-computer interaction at the School of Information. I've been struggling to find internships and jobs in responsible AI that hire anthropologists. The focus is on having engineering skills, but AI is becoming increasingly embedded in everyday social life. How do you suggest anthropologists and other social scientists get into the room of developing these technologies if having technical skills is not my strength, understanding people is?
I think you just had your job interview and you're finished. I mean, I don't think...
I get rejected just because I click, I don't have a PhD, and then I don't get considered at all.
That's mostly Microsoft research, not the rest of the company. So I don't know where you've been applying, but you should send me an email note.
We're connected on LinkedIn.
Yeah, but more generally, people with your skills that you've described are just in high demand. I can't imagine someone saying, you're not a computer scientist. I mean, even Maggie wants to talk to you. Where's Maggie? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, no, I think you'd be high, that kinds of skills for program management, for directing programs. I think anthropologists are fabulous. So Mary Gray is an anthropologist. Do you know who she is, Mary Gray? You should look her up. So Mary Gray is an anthropologist by formal training at Microsoft Research in our Cambridge, Massachusetts office. She's written widely. She's become a MacArthur Fellow about 1.5 years, 2 years ago now. She makes a very strong statement about the value of anthropologists at computer science companies. So she'd be a great mentor to talk to.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
Perfect. And I think we're going to end with a bit of a bigger question, if you don't mind.
Pretty big, I thought.
So I know you talked a lot about collaboration. Like, I even learned about Midjourney well before this lecture, and it's fascinating. Like, you just type in any prompt, and within a minute, you get an amazing art picture. And I guess what I'm wondering is, like, do you see there being a point when human collaboration isn't necessary? Like, is there a point when, like, AI can write a better prompt and create a better image than humans can? And like, will humans become obsolete? And does it even matter if AI has the same values that we do? Is there like something intrinsically special about, humans making art and humans reviewing art, or AI making art and AI reviewing art? I know it's kind of a big question, but something that's been on my mind recently, so.
That was the big point of the big long-term concerns that I put in that slide. How do we work with, should we see an evolution of AI systems so they are doing things like you say? How will we feel about it as humans? What does it all mean? So I asked that question of you a few minutes ago. I'm glad you're asking it back now. Slides that I didn't include today, that I just didn't have time to included what's happened in chess over even the last 6 years, where 6 years ago, for correspondence chess, which is, days, there was this idea of centaur chess, where a human plus machine was better than machine alone. I checked back with Murray Campbell, one of the contributors to the Deep Blue project, who's very passionate about computer chess. When I was doing the talk and doing those slides, which ended up being deleted because of time, I said, well, what's happened today? Well, today humans can't help. It's amazing. And so I went looking at some of what leading chess players say. They say, we've always known that computers would be better than us. I'm enjoying learning from them. Right? Who was the name of that? What's the name of it? Magnus Carlsen, who just lost after all these years. I had his quote. He said, I learn from computers. I train with them. They're better than me, and I learn from them. And then I was going to talk about this idea, which is folks at Cornell, working with some MSR people, did a chess system designed to be a pedagogue, to teach. So it's a system designed to predict human moves for different level players. And also, the probability they'll hit a blunder and help them through it to really become better. So it's designed not just to play chess, but to understand human cognition to help people do better. The point is, though, can we ensure that these systems will be helping us versus knowing us so well they harm us, which gets into this idea of the concerns that some people have about long-term futures of AI. That's why I think we have to weigh in, because either way, there'll be profound changes on the planet over hundreds of years. Let's start now to think about this, if not earlier. So thanks for your big question. And thanks, everybody.
Let's thank Eric and all the questioners. I'd like to thank you very much. Fortunately, we have a panel tomorrow morning.
Oh, gosh. Oh, right now.
We snuck that up on him.
I'm ready to pass out.
And so at 10 o'clock, we're going to have a panel discussion with 3 eminent experts in philosophy, cognitive science, and artificial intelligence who will provide responses to what we've just heard. And then there'll be a discussion between Eric and the panel, and then an open discussion between Eric and everybody else here. And that panel will be right here at 10. But at 9, there will be a breakfast buffet, and after the panel is done, there will be a lunch buffet. So please come. We look forward to, obviously, there's plenty of questions left to ask. And let me actually let Alec have the very final word. Surprise.
No, not a surprise. Why don't we thank Eric and Ben again for this wonderful presentation and discussion we had. Great. I've learned a lot. This is such a pivotal moment as we engage in this dialogue about artificial intelligence and how it can be applied in ways that reflect and respects human values. You know, I thought of the word flourishing that came to my mind, but I also thought about democratization. And I worry that one of the things that I took away from this is the incredible power that AI has to democratize, but also, if not done right, how it can be used to widen the gaps between the have and the have-nots, the people who have access to these resources and the ones who don't. And then part of our society will flourish and the other part won't. So we have to really work hard and make sure that doesn't happen. But luckily, we'll have ample opportunities to talk about this. So again, Eric Horvitz will be here. And I want to introduce the panelists who will be here tomorrow as well. Professor Peter Railton from LSA's Department of Philosophy will be on the panel. Professor Richard Lewis, also from LSNA, Department of Psychology, and also a member of the Weinberg Institute for Cognitive Sciences, and our very own Professor Radha Mihalcha from Michigan Engineering. She's in the Department of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science, and also a member of the Computer Science and Engineering Division, and runs our AI lab. So we know that one of the things that stimulates great conversations is caloric intake, so we'll be feeding you. So as Ben mentioned, we have breakfast at 9 before the panel starts at 10. And we have lunch available for all people after the panel at 12:30 to 2:30. So we hope to see you there. Thank you for coming. Hope to see you tomorrow.
I want to introduce you to Jenna and Maggie.